Welcome to the Long COVID podcast with me, Jackie Baxter. I am really excited to bring you today's episode. Please do check out the links in the show notes where you can find the podcast website, social media and support group, as well as a link to buy me a coffee if you are able. You should not rely on any medical information contained in this podcast and related materials in making medical, health-related or other decisions. Please do consult a doctor or other health professional. I love to hear from you. If you've got any suggestions or feedback or just want to say hey, then please do get in touch. I really hope you enjoy this episode, so here we go. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Long COVID podcast. Today I'm going to be discussing one of the things that helped me the most in my recovery: cold water immersion. One of the questions I get asked the most is, how did you recover from long COVID? Now that's a totally valid question. I'm not going to answer that question specifically today because I already did it in episode 94. That's my recovery story. I'll link that episode in the show notes below so you can check out the full story if you want to. What I'm going to talk about today is the question that I get asked probably the second most, which is around cold water immersion or cold water swimming. This was something that I found hugely beneficial in my own recovery, but I also see others find it not so helpful. So why did it work for me, but it doesn't work for everyone? And how do we know before we try it? So I'm going to pull together my own experiences, what I've learned from research, from my own observations, from my own professional knowledge of the nervous system and breathing. This episode is not medical advice. If you are considering trying this out, please consult a medical professional who you trust and discuss it with them before trying it. I'm not able to give advice on this. So let's get into the science. Why cold water? I mean, cold water is just cold water, right? Why would it have these magical healing powers that people, including me, talk about? So let's dive into this and understand a little bit about what's going on, and then we can make informed decisions. So when our body goes into cold water, there are two main things that affect us. Number one, the cold, and number two, the pressure of the water. So we experience what is called the cold shock response. This is the cardiovascular response experienced by unhabituated cold swimmers. It's a reflex response driven by our sympathetic nervous system, so that's our fight-flight response, due to the activation of peripheral cold receptors. So you might have experienced this if you stepped into a cold shower by accident, or someone else in your house turned on a hot tap while you were in the shower. The water goes cold, you gasp, followed by increased breathing rate, faster heart rate, and our blood pressure also rises. Now, you may not have noticed all of those things to a huge extent, because the moment the water went cold, you probably moved out from underneath it. But you may have noticed some of those things in that situation. So our sympathetic nervous system is activated, which, alongside the increase in breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure, also causes vasoconstriction in our skin, brown adipose tissue thermogenesis, and neurons that cause shivering in the muscles to create heat. So the body activates its response to keeping us warm. So, as with my shower example, to get this response, you don't need to be fully immersed in the water. A cold shower will do it too. However, now to the other side of the equation, the parasympathetic response, our rest and digest. So at the same time that our body activates the sympathetic or fight-flight response, our body also activates the parasympathetic or rest and digest system through what is known as the diving response, which lowers our heart rate and blood pressure. So the hydrostatic pressure caused by the water stimulates our baroreceptors, resulting in bringing down the sympathetic activation and increasing our vagal tone. This increase in the vagus nerve activity brings our parasympathetic nervous system back online and brings our body back into regulation. So by immersing ourselves in cold water, we get this physiological conflict in the system where these two opposing responses can actually sort of occur at the same time. So anyone who has tried cold water immersion, whether recently or in the past, may have noticed that once that initial shock has passed, that the body settles and feels surprisingly comfortable in the water. Someone who is habituated, that is to say that they immerse regularly and the body is somewhat used to it, will probably find that the cold shock lasts a shorter time than someone who is swimming for the first time. However, 90 to 120 seconds should do it. And you notice it by the fact that you do feel more comfortable. The body settles, you think, oh my goodness, that was awful, but actually now I'm okay. Your breathing has settled, your heart rate has got a little bit lower. So, okay, that sounds cold. Why do I want to do this? So there's a lot of benefits into doing this. There's some research going on into this that's really, really fascinating. And more is being done with time. However, what we do know is that when we go into cold water, it temporarily impairs cognitive function. Now, on the surface, this doesn't sound like a good idea. But for those of us who have those very busy brains, getting into the water can be a wonderful way of taking that step to the right, a phrase coined by the wonderful neuroscientist Jill Bolte Taylor, where we get out of our logical overthinking part of the brain and into the relaxed creative flow side that can actually kind of switch off a little bit. So it can be really great for that. And certainly that was my experience. You know, I find it very, very difficult to get out of my head, but getting into the water every single time did it. We also, by getting into the cold water, increase our habituation to the cold, so we get more used to it. It increases dopamine, which helps us to feel happier, which sounds pretty good when we're feeling pretty rubbish. It increases endorphins, which helps to reduce pain and also improve our mood. It increases noradrenaline, which activates our brown fat, which can help to give us an energy boost, as well as making us more resilient. So brown fat has a higher mitochondria content. So if we have more brown fat, we have more concentration of mitochondria. It also helps to stabilize our cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and serotonin, which helps to regulate mood, sleep, appetite, and digestion. The cold water increases our immune response. It decreases blood pressure, reduces inflammation, increases insulin sensitivity, and reduces swelling and joint pain. It also has a huge impact on our mental health, certainly for me anyway. So sweet, that sounds amazing. Where do I sign up? So bringing it back to the long COVID and ME/CFS community, if this is such a miracle cure, why can't I try it? Okay, so the science relative to long COVID and ME/CFS, this is important. Because I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying it's important to understand what happens and why it might need some adaptation, preparation, and care around it. So, as much as the science says around the cold water about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic working together when we immerse ourselves, what we do know is that getting into cold water is quite a big stressor. It puts quite a lot of physical stress on our body. We get into the cold, and our body effectively goes, holy shit, that's cold. And it senses danger. Now, with long COVID and ME/CFS, our system is already feeling unsafe. Generally, that danger survival response is already on overdrive. The problem generally isn't stressing up. The body is probably already there. It's stressing down that's the struggle, bringing the body back to regulation. So, don't stress up if you don't know how to stress down. So, do you have tools that you have learned and practiced that enable you to bring your body back to that regulated state? Or do you get activated and stay activated for hours, days, or even weeks if the doorbell goes, for example? Do you fly off the cliff straight into that shutdown? So, starting to understand our own nervous systems is so key to recovery. What works? What doesn't? How much do I do a thing? How do I understand the signs that it's working or not? A lot of the work that I do with people is sussing this out so we can judge things for ourselves. We can understand the signals that our body is giving us and attend to our body's needs. Therefore, bringing ourselves into that state of regulation by creating a sense of safety in the body. Safety is felt, not thought. So I think it's important to understand where you are in your journey. Is the time right? Or should you focus on other strategies to stabilize things first? And I think definitely stabilizing first, you know. So my experiences, what did I do? I didn't really know any of this information. I had seen some improvement, in fact, quite a lot of improvement through the breathing strategies. I'd used a lot of yoga nidra, targeted rest, doing less, generally managing things much better. I still overdid things. I still crashed, but things were a little more stable. But I felt a bit stuck. I'd plateaued in my recovery. Felt like I wasn't really getting anywhere. So although things were better, they weren't progressing. So somebody had mentioned cold water to me previously, and I thought it sounded like an absolutely horrible idea, and I dismissed it. But it was coming into April. The weather here was warming up a little, and I decided to give it a go. If it didn't help, I didn't have to do it again. Maybe this was my eyeballs to eat. I think this was a phrase that I heard, I think it was Laurie Rivers, that we would get to the point where we would do literally anything to recover, even eating eyeballs. So I thought, well, if I had to get into the cold water, if that's going to help me, then fine. I'll put myself through that. I'll do that. I'll eat my eyeballs. Maybe not my own. Anyway. So I went down to Loch Ness, which is a short distance from where I live. I appreciate I'm very lucky with that. And I eased myself super, super slowly into the water. It made for an awesome photo, but my goodness, it was cold. I stayed in a few seconds and then I got out, got my clothes back on, sat on the beach, and I felt amazing. A little chilly, but amazing. Now, of course, the effects didn't last, but I kept doing it several times a week, sometimes more. Over time, I was able to stay in a little bit longer. It helped that we were coming into summer and the water was warming up a bit. And over time, the effects started lasting for a little longer. So I would have more energy for longer and longer. After a swim, I was able to do more. So I started being a bit tactical about it. I'd go for a swim before a walk because my body could do more after. I was then also able to start swimming slightly bigger distances. So at first I was pootling along the bank a little, but over time longer. And what I found was that swimming was a great form of exercise because it's supported by the water and also the compression. So for those who utilize compression leggings, swimming, not necessarily in the cold, could actually be a safer way into movement when the time is right because of that kind of natural compression and the support from the water. Take care getting out afterwards when you lose that compression, of course. So although recovery wasn't linear from this point, I never felt worse for being in the cold water. I wouldn't always feel totally amazing afterwards, but it would always make me feel better, even if it was just a little bit. I think another reason it really resonated with me was because I'm an outdoors person. So if you're someone who hates the outdoors, then it's probably not very appealing to you. And that's totally fair. But for me, being outdoors, being in nature, having adventures is so important to me. It's such a big part of my life. And I felt such a sense of loss that I couldn't do that. I couldn't go up the mountains, but I could look at some of them from below. So this allowed me to be out in nature in a different way. It also allowed me to meet new people eventually. People who also did cold water, but they didn't judge me against who I was before because they didn't know me before. I could do a little swim and then I'd chat for a bit afterwards because a lot of them would stay in longer. Physically, the cold water helped me so much, but mentally, it was huge as well. So, why was it so powerful for me? But other people have found that either it didn't help or maybe even that it made them worse. And this is why we have to be careful with this, because it's one thing something not working, not helping. It's another thing doing it and finding that it makes you worse. Do no harm, isn't it? That's important. But also, we have to be curious because that's how we find our way through this. So, with the benefit of hindsight, there's two big mistakes that I see people making. Now, I was lucky not to make these mistakes, but I see it often in what other people are saying. So, the two mistakes that I see are people trying it too soon and staying in for too long. So, let me explain why. Beginning too soon, as I mentioned above, the cold water is a stressor. If we stress up before we have any stability, before we have the strategies in place to stress down, our bodies may not cope with it. So instead of the nice activation followed by relaxation response, the body may just go totally stratospheric and then straight off the cliff into a crash. And we don't want that. That's awful. The other thing is staying in too long. Now, I get this. You've made the effort to travel to somewhere where you can swim, you can get into the water, so you're damn well going to make it worth it. However, as I said earlier, those maximum benefits are around about the 90-second to 2-minute mark. Staying in longer will only allow the body to get colder, which will then require more energy to warm back up afterwards. Energy you may not be able to afford to spend. And whereas someone without a health challenge may be able to run up and down the beach and do star jumps to warm back up, that's probably not something that you're able to do. Not just yet, anyway. So remember, less is more. We'll be right back. I'm interrupting myself for a second to tell you about long COVID breathing. The fabulous Vicky Jones and I have teamed up to bring you long COVID breathing. We are both passionate about sharing our expertise and experience of the breath and how incredibly helpful that can be with long COVID. We've worked together to develop a course that is specifically tailored to those with long COVID. It's a 6-week course with 12 sessions, all delivered online. The community feel and learning that we're all sharing is such a joy. To To find out more information and to sign up for our courses, workshops, and other shorter sessions, please check out the link below, longcovidbreathing.com, or email longcovidbreathing@gmail.com to start your breathing journey with us. So why did it work for me? I think there was luck, for sure. I had unwittingly started at the right time. I'd seen a lot of improvement. Things were more stable. And I had a lot of strategies to regulate my body that I was doing regularly. And I practiced over and over. Counter to what I normally do, I was also very gentle with myself. I started with a very short immersion and gradually worked up as my body allowed. Breathing. You knew I'd get to this, didn't you? Using the breath as a gauge of how slow to go in. So walking into the water at the pace my breath could handle. If the breath started speeding up, slow down or abort if necessary. If my body felt more activated or maybe shut down, I'd stay in less time or maybe not get in at all. So always listening to the signals my body was giving me. What does my body need right now? Does it need water or not? Interestingly, when I chatted to Dan Neufer, we've done 3 episodes together on the podcast over the last 3 years. He reckoned that the cold water in some ways was like hardcore brain training. Maybe he's right. Maybe it helped me in that way too. So how can we test ourselves gently? How can we work out if this is something that you might be ready for, or is it something to put on the later shelf? So, breath. How is your breath when you get stressed? Do you have techniques to calm it? Do you know how to bring activation down? Do you know how to recognize activation in your body? Make a list of strategies that you like and practice them. If you need assistance, then work with someone. A coach or a therapist may be a good shout. You can work with me if you like. So can you control your breath? If you can't, then don't get into cold water. Try putting cold water on your face. Run some into the sink and maybe just splash a little bit. Or use a flannel. Turn your shower cold for a few seconds at the end. How does your body respond to that? Interestingly, my body hates that. I do it every time I get in the shower, hates it. But the full immersion really works for me. So it doesn't always follow. But it's something to at least test your kind of response to it. And are you physically able to get somewhere where you can fully immerse? Because overexerting to get there is not going to help you in the long run. Why is it important to consult with a medical professional? Because I am not one in this regard. Taking advice from someone who's tried it before is useful to listen to, but doesn't constitute a medical professional. It's so important to speak to someone before starting cold water immersion. There are certain conditions for which it's contraindicated. So, for example, heart disease, arrhythmias, epilepsy, to name a few. There are others. If you experience Raynaud's, you may need to consider extra gloves, or even if it's a good idea. I do know people who swim with Raynaud's, but again, always check with your doctor. There are also some medications which can change the body's abilities to cope with the cold or the cold stress. So this isn't an exhaustive list. It's really important to speak to a doctor. Cold water can feel like total magic if you get it right for your body. But it's an extremely powerful thing. And if it's done in a way or at a time that isn't right for you, it can cause danger. So please don't take it lightly. So cold water and the breath. As I've said so far, when we enter the cold water, our body senses the cold and it feels like it's in danger, bringing on that fight-flight activation or that danger response. When we do this, the natural reaction is that our breath speeds up. We might gasp, ooh. Be mindful of your breath. Make sure you can control it. Please don't go into the cold water if you can't control your breath. Taking those slow, deep breaths into the diaphragm, staying calm, slowing down, taking longer to get in if you need to. And don't be afraid to turn back if the breath feels out of control and things don't feel good. If we breathe too fast and start hyperventilating, we can get dizzy or even black out. This is dangerous in any situation, but particularly in the water. So learn to control your breath first. If you do want to work with me, I'll put a link in the show notes. Controlling the breath will help with all manner of things, but it will also make it safer to enter the cold water. So, some safe swimming tips. Beyond what I've already said about stress and medical professionals and the cold shock and all of that, safe swimming is so important for anyone doing cold water immersion. Please don't get into the water if you can't swim. Don't swim alone. At the very least, have someone next to the water to keep an eye on you, preferably in the water with you. Wear something on your feet, partly to keep them a little warmer, but so you don't cut or hurt your feet on rocks or anything sharp in the water. Stay in less time than you think. Get out before you start to shiver. The reason for this is the after drop. This is where the body will feel colder after you get out of the water. So this is important. This is why it's important to get out before you feel cold. You may feel fine when you get out of the water, but then find yourself shivering 10 minutes later. So this is your body trying to warm itself up, but it will take energy. So getting out when you still feel good. Take care with your entry and exit points. Don't get into something you can't easily get out of. If you're going out of your depth, make sure you've got a life buoy or a float, keeping your breath slow as you enter the water. If that breath starts to speed up, slow down, stop. The first time you go in, just stay in for a few seconds. Be aware of tides or currents in the water, as well as the wind direction. If there are other local swimmers, they are great sources of this information. Have warm stuff to put on quickly afterwards, and maybe someone could help you by handing you things. Avoid swimming in the dark, or if you have to, using a torch, and stay close to the bank and make sure someone is with you. Don't put your head under, as that increases the autonomic conflict and it speeds up heat loss. And warm the body up naturally. So never get straight into a hot shower or bath. The blood will rush to the skin and you'll feel dizzy. Same with car heating. Don't turn it up full blast. Lots of layers and a warm drink will work much better. And don't go in the water if you are acutely unwell. So if you have a cold or if you've consumed alcohol. So I'm going to run you through my cold water routine. This still is on some level, although now I'm able to stay in a little longer and I can be more active in my warm-up. But I still largely stick to this. So listening to my body, does it actually want to go in the water? If I'm not sure, and this happened a lot, oh, I should go for the cold water. Oh, but I'm not sure if my body wants to. Or I'd love to go for a walk, but does my body actually want to? So a great tip from my therapist was to visualize it. See how it felt in the visualization. And then I'd be able to tell if it was what I wanted, or actually, oh, no, actually the sofa and a cup of tea was more my jam. Choose somewhere out of the wind to leave my stuff. If it was raining, under a tree, putting a jacket over things to keep them dry. Setting things out ready. If I was using a float, blowing it up. get my hat, and if I was using them, gloves and shoes, towel, hot drink, so they were all easy to hand. I'd always put my swimming costume on before I went. It was one less thing to change into there. For me, I used a bikini because it was much easier to get in and out of. I've witnessed people fighting for 10 minutes to get out of a wetsuit, and it just didn't appeal to me. No judgment if you want to, but for me, it was about getting in, getting the benefits, and getting out, rather than using a wetsuit to stay in longer. It was about making it easy. So taking clothes off, placing them down in reverse order. So the outer layers or extra layers would go first, then other tops, then bottoms, then underwear. So when I got out, it was all in the right order. Ladies, keep it simple. Some people don't bother with underwear at all afterwards. I'm a big fan of those tops that have the crop top built in. It's one less thing for fingers to deal with. Bra straps and cold hands are not your friend, believe me. You want your stuff as close to the water as possible so you don't have to walk a distance to and from it. If you're sea swimming though, please be aware of which direction the tide is going. We nearly got caught out by this in the dark a few months ago, which would have been somewhat ironic. Getting into the water slowly, controlling the breath. If it's been a stressful day, I'll have to go in slower. Depending on where I am in my cycle, my body will respond in a different way. Some people say don't swim in your period. I do, and I find it helps, but everyone is different. Afterwards, pat myself dry, put my clothes on my top first because it'll keep me the warmest, adding extra layers. You might find sitting down to do your feet and your socks. Don't overthink it. Get it on quickly. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't matter what you look like. Getting your layers on is more important. Enjoy your warm drink, possibly a sugary snack, which is supposed to help the body temperature increase. Movement will help warm the body up gently if that's something you're able to do. Doesn't need to be dramatic. Snow angel arms are a good one because you can do it sitting or even lying down. Keeping that breath slow and allowing the body to come gently back to temperature. It might take a couple of hours to be truly back to temperature. Don't worry, but add plenty of layers, get snuggly, and congratulate yourself for doing it. I always feel amazing. So hopefully this has answered some of those questions around cold water and its potential in recovery. As I said, please don't take this as any form of advice or medical advice. I DIY'd it and got lucky. It's something I'm hugely grateful for because it changed my life. But if I'd done it less carefully or at a different time in recovery, it might have had different results. If you're interested in learning more, I've interviewed a couple of experts on this. I'll drop the links in the show notes. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Susanne Soberg. She's a Danish scientist who's doing a lot of research into cold water immersion. And I fact-checked a lot of this information from her publishings. She's got a wonderful book called Winter Swimming. There's a book also called Chill by Dr. Mark Harper from episode 87, which is also really good. I will say one more time, please don't try this without medical advice. If you do try it, go gently. And let me know how you get on, or if you've got tips or tricks of your own. I think the most important thing in recovery is having the right tools for you and the right tools for the situation. So maybe cold water isn't for you just now. Maybe it's something you'll be able to access further down the road in your recovery. And that there are other preparations that you could be making now, like your breath, for example. As always, thank you for the questions. Please keep them coming. I love to hear from people. I'll be back next time with another fabulous guest. And until then, I wish you safe onward travels on your recovery journey. Thank you so much to all of my guests and to you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, or at least found it useful. The Long COVID podcast is entirely self-produced and self-funded. I'm doing all of this myself. If you're able to, please go to buymeacoffee.com/longcovidpod to help me cover the costs of hosting the podcast. Please look out for the next episode of the Long COVID podcast. It's available on all the usual podcast hosting things. And do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you.